Good evening. I'm James Sceniak. I'm your Libertarian candidate for the U.S. Senate race here in Indiana. Tonight's town hall has a special guest, Jeff Moore. Before we get there, though, I want to remind you guys that this is a town hall. We do this so we can get questions from you and anything that's relevant to the office of Secretary of State or Senate. So tonight, again, welcome Jeff Moore, and always welcome Chris Groff, who's producing this and will ask us the questions as they come in. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Good evening, James. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening. So we'll start off with some light discussion before we get into the fun stuff. So rumor has it that James is playing his campaign manager in fantasy football this Sunday, and apparently the outlook does not look well.
Well, I need to update my team before tomorrow night, and campaign has taken priority, and so yeah, there's that. But I'll hopefully get to my team tonight after this and maybe make some changes. But yeah, right now I don't think I'm on the winning projected.
Well, you're not. I can tell you that much.
So I think I can say that you scream, I scream, we all scream for ice cream. We all win no matter what with ice cream. And I was sitting down for an interview earlier today with WTHR in downtown Indy. Mm-hmm. And it was a good question, which was, tell us one sort of secret or one thing about you that we wouldn't know anywhere else. And my mind did go a little bit blank, but I did say, I love ice cream, and I love ice cream a little bit more than I should. And I want to communicate and reinforce that point that it's maybe not a healthy relationship with ice cream, how much I love ice cream. So whatever happens with your fantasy football team, just know that at the end of the day, we can all have ice cream.
So here's a question for you. Is gelato better than ice cream? Because I totally think it is.
So fun fact, gelato and ice cream and frozen yogurt and custard all have different legal definitions. They're technically all legal, different products. I forget which ones have egg in it, which ones have different percentages of milk fat, and they all need air in them in order to taste. If it were 0% air, you wouldn't taste any of it. So the percentage of air is a mixture within it helps also define it. So there are very strict legal definitions about what is what is what, but I like them all. I don't know if that's a cop-out. When I'm in Europe, I definitely eat my fair share of gelato. I love a good frozen custard. St. Louis is kind of famous, Ted Drew's, so I went there for college, and I ate a lot of frozen custard there. And then, of course, ice cream.
Well, I just picked up, I've been trying to stay away from ice cream, but I think the stress of the debate coming up, I just picked up an Aldi's cookies and cream ice cream, and I was sitting there for the longest time, gelato or ice cream. And I typically go gelato, but for today, I went cookies and cream. So I think I was going back to some basics there.
So a buddy of mine from the Air Force, he has a family business of an ice cream shop in New Jersey on the shore. And I got to go out and visit, and it was pretty much my idea of heaven. Like, I got there and it was all the ice cream I could try, almost 90 of their flavors, 90. So it was just rapid fire. Try this. Now do this. Put that here. And I felt like Augustus Gloop in Willy Wonka. It was so good.
So I sensed a little bit of a debate technique there, Jeff. You strayed from the fantasy football to ice cream.
I can pivot, right? We can pivot.
I like the pivot. I like it. So speaking of debates, you had your debate this week. I was watching it and I was absolutely amazed. But my first question to you, Jeff, was what is one takeaway from that debate that you want viewers, if it was only one takeaway, what would be that takeaway for viewers?
We can count our votes the way we count cash. And when we do that, we'll finally get the elections we deserve. So it's just a question of if we choose to. I choose to.
So, and I have one because I've always been curious. And so like after, debate's over, credits roll, was Destiny willing to shake your hand after? Because it really didn't look like it.
Oh, absolutely. No, she was, it's a strange, sort of a strange room. It's dark. We're staring into the lights. So, we were both exhausted. It was a tiring thing. And it was funny because Destiny and I have spent enough time on stage together, and obviously we disagree about plenty of things, but we can both be civil, and we're both, the fact remains that we're both going through this experience together. So I did turn to her and shake her hand and congratulate her and thank her for being there. And we both compared notes. And we thought like that felt like a really long time. And I think we may have both checked our watches or wanted to check our watches in the middle of it. But an hour of intense questioning where every single word counts. And there's something about staring into the TV camera that just sort of blanks out my mind. And it's hard. It's hard to stay focused. It's hard to stay on point. And it was good to be able to shake hands and walk off as professionals.
So, real quick before we get too much further, I just wanted to remind those coming in this is a town hall, so we take questions. Please welcome Jeff Moore. He's our Secretary of State candidate, and anything relevant to his office, you can ask him. Technically, you can ask him anything, but would love for you to open it up to the audience and then me running for Senate. So, definitely bring those questions on, and we're here for you. Chris.
So we do have a couple of questions already.
Yeah, can we dive into those?
Have you ever had homemade ice cream?
So I haven't made it myself. I have a homemade ice cream maker. What I need to do is really get focused and get the ingredients and try and do it right. I feel like that's a rabbit hole where I know I'm a little bit OCD about things and I'm going to want to try and perfect it. So once you start, you can't stop. And that's the slippery slope. I just need to clear enough runway to do it and do it right.
All right. So now we'll get into the real question. So Matt Fletcher asks, what do you mean by the way we count cash?
Sure. So it's everything around cash. Think about a coffee shop. It's not just the cash in the drawer, but everybody who handles it, who drops off cash. Is there a security company that does? Do you need small bills? So, and who picks up big cash after you've been collecting sales during the day, ringing them up? So it's the people in the store, it's the hardware, it's the software, it's the security cameras in the building, it's the protocols of only staff are allowed behind the counter, right? Common sense. If customers or just anybody walking behind the counter to touch the cash register, is that weird? Yeah, that's kind of weird. So we have all of that. Then we have all the upstream points that touch our cash. It's the people that we trust, the vendor who comes in to collect the cash, the security company. And who are they? How are they trusted? Or how are they vetted? How are they insured? How are they identified? Is that the right company or is it a guy wearing one of their uniforms? So think about all the common sense things that we've developed over decades and centuries about cash management. That's for physically securing our cash. And that would be comparable to counting our votes. And we just saw this in St. Joe County, where there's video of the county clerk going into a secured room. That's like watching a customer go behind the counter and start touching the cash machine. That's just weird. And we should ask questions about that. Now let's talk about all the digital side of things and what kind of crypto security. So imagine a cash register that's taking electronic payments. We want to know what software is on there. Is it audited? Is it inspected? Does it tie out? Does it tie out to our sales? If we have $1,000 of sales, digital sales in the cash register, but we've given out $5,000 worth of coffee, does that add up? How does that disconnect? Why are we short on cash that we've received? So think about all the many different touch points. Bottom line, if we can count our votes the way we count cash, we're going to finally get the elections we deserve.
I mean, it makes sense to me. A lot of shady stuff seems to happen.
Well, I really like this example because back when I bartended, I had a cash register, and the thing is there's so many accountability factors. There's the camera on you, then there's the numbers from the night before, there's the numbers that you're supposed to have that night, and so to me it really makes sense. And I think it's a perfect example of what should the election process be. And again, if something's not adding it up, you audit it. Your first audit is to do a recount yourself. And then, if it's still not there, you call a manager. And that's why I think your audit message is really resonating with voters, because it makes sense.
It's common sense. We absolutely can do this. We have been doing this. We do this every day in business. The question is, why do we choose not to do it in our elections?
Where it matters.
I believe it does.
Yeah.
And I believe I'm not the only one.
Absolutely. So we've got another one here. You mentioned during the debate the CEO being arrested. Who's in charge of voting machines? Are those voting machines in Indiana?
So the CEO who was arrested is Eugene Yu, last name YU. He is apparently a U.S. citizen, although has all kinds of business ties to China. The company is called Pole Chief, and they are headquartered in Michigan. He was traveling in California where he was arrested on a warrant from the Los Angeles District Attorney. That indictment, basically the justification, the evidence for why he should be arrested, is still sealed, and we don't know the details of that. In fact, we don't know many details. We just know that. And the company's website, you can I forget the exact one, but just Google Pole Chief or search for it online, and you can find the different services that this company offers. Their primary service is managing poll workers. So if you had a list of volunteers who are going to imagine Santa Claus at the North Pole, if he had a software to imagine all the different to manage all the different elves and who's working which shift and who's building what, that's essentially the software that they facilitate. And naturally, that includes a lot of personal data about who's going to be who is who, right? Name, address, phone number, payroll-related data. And remember, poll workers do get paid. It's not much. It's $125 for a 12-hour shift of hard work on your feet. So, but there is payroll information that we need to obtain, and it is taxable income. So that all that data exists in or should exist within Pole Chief. Pole Chief also has a couple other software products. One manages voter registration, and it also manages biometric data for registered voters. So I imagine a thumbprint or some other biometric data. It's not clear from the website. I'm not an expert in their software, but these are the types of things that they do, and it is on plain sight on their website. What I understand is only the poll worker software, Pole Chief, basically the managing software, is used in Indiana, and it's used in at least Marion County, potentially others as well. But Marion County is our most populous county, so it stands to reason that the biggest impact or vulnerability from the software is meaningful. And again, I should reiterate that there's so much that we don't know about this case right now. There's emerging data, but as I said in the debate, this is a flashing red warning sign. We have to at least recognize that these vulnerabilities exist. Maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe it's a witch hunt and everything's a-okay. Maybe they're confused with some other country. Who knows? But let them find that out, right? Innocent until proven guilty, due process, all those things. That's what we believe in. That's what I believe in. But we have to recognize the potential for this kind of vulnerability. And that's why we need to work immediately to continue to secure these parts of our elections.
I totally get that, because it's like, is it something that's fun to do? Probably not. But at the end of the day, won't you feel better knowing that it's like getting an error on your computer. It might be nothing, but it also might be that your hard drive's getting ready to die. And you just like to know that it's not that.
I mentioned earlier today that every time we get in the car and turn it on, we do an audit. We look at the dashboard and we look at all of our red lights and see what's flashing. Tire pressure, oil, speed, temperature, mileage, anything that's off or flashing warning system lines, transmission, engine, check engine. Think about that as an audit. We are looking at a quick summary of the systems. And then if there is a problem, low oil, gas gauge is empty, we can then start to manage the process from there for what comes next. What do we check on next? What's the next drill down layer? And that really tells us at a glance how the system is working. But until we have that report, until we have that transparency, we don't know. So instead, imagine flying blind with no instrumentation, no gauges. You have no idea how fast you're going or how much oil you have left, or if your check engine light has been on for days. And that's what one of my great frustrations, and where I think I disagree most with at least my Democrat opponent. We don't know much about my Republican opponent, but my Democrat opponent seems to be strongly of the opinion that everything's fine, and that we don't need to, that doubting anything is believing in the big lie, sort of like doubting your dashboard. Nope, my car's fine, my car's perfect. I don't need a dashboard. I don't want to look at my dashboard because everything must be perfect. And sorry, I'm going to look at my dashboard and see what it's telling me.
Was a great.
Our dashboard looks like a Christmas tree, Jeff. We probably should get it checked.
Usually so, especially if you hear a large brake noise.
Fun story. Not so fun, actually.
No, it's all well that ends well. It's a fun story, James. Tell it.
I was on the campaign trail, and we were about to hit our fourth event of the weekend.
It was of the day.
And all of a sudden, I just hear pure metal to metal when I'm braking. And apparently, with how many miles I'm driving, brakes go out a little bit faster than I anticipated. So we had to take care of that. And thanks to Jeff and Jeff's team for making sure I got back safe. We figured it out, and it was just a brake pad. But yeah, definitely check your warning signs before they become big issues.
And that's a perfect example. Like a good risk management program checks brakes regularly and would know, hey, we're driving more often, we're braking more often, we're doing more miles. We should check brakes more often, just more often. And then we should replace them or service them more regularly. And despite our best intentions and our best preventive maintenance, sometimes things just fail and that's it. So how do we respond to that? And we immediately pulled over. We immediately got called for help. We immediately started to diagnose the problem. We minimized our risk, right? We drove locally to get it fixed. We changed our schedule. Unfortunately, we had to cancel an event that we we're both looking forward to, but it was a safety issue. So we adjusted accordingly. So imagine now if we use that same good risk management process and discipline in our elections. We could be checking our machines. We could be checking our software. We could be reviewing audit reports. We could be discussing with clerks and poll workers and voters and getting feedback and making adjustments in real time to make sure that everything is as secure as possible.
Absolutely.
And this is common sense stuff. All of this is common sense. Any father would know this. Pull over, take care of your brakes. Why don't we do the same with our elections?
All right, Chris, where are we at with the questions?
So I'm gonna do one here. We've got a couple more for Jeff. I'm gonna jump to one that's for both, just to mix it up a little bit. Could you briefly discuss straight ticket voting? Is it overall helpful or harmful to representative government? And what changes, if any, would the candidates like to see regarding this? And James, we'll start with you and give Jeff a little bit of a break.
Yeah, so straight ticket voting, I think we're one of 6 states that still do it, which is kind of an old-fashioned idea, and it really should not exist. However, as a libertarian, I don't make that my excuse for elections. For example, there's many times Hoosiers have split their tickets. Obama is a perfect example of that. We elected a Republican governor and a Democrat presidential candidate. So as a candidate, I can't worry too much about straight ticket. It's what we have, even though it's outdated and unfortunate, and hopefully that'll change. But that's not going to be my excuse. I'm going to win votes, and I just have to tell people, look at your ballot, look at the options, and right now, straight ticket is not your best option. So it's kind of both. It's what we're dealing with, and I have to let them know that there's better ways to vote.
Well said on all of that. Remember, it's very antiquated. It's a shorthand form of party control. And so guess what? We have a strong two-party system, and then it helps reinforce that. It helps prevent other competitors. So if the entire world, let's imagine that you could only order pizza through one app. And if Domino's and Papa John's controlled that app, good luck finding a local independent pizza place, because they're just going to force everybody else out. And that's what we have. Election day is one app, and it's controlled by the Papa John's and Domino's of our world.
So now I have to wonder, because I've heard you mention this like 6 different ways now. Do you just keep all of those stored ready to launch them?
It depends on the moment. Right now I'm thinking pizza. Is it too late to order?
The menu at a restaurant. And it's just
you probably notice the food about trend. I like food, and also part of my career was working in DOT compliance. So not compliant. I mean, yes, it was compliance for government's sake, but it was about being proactive and really about safety and managing a bottom line. And it's like Moneyball, right? We are working to address the underlying behaviors, so that way we stay safe. I was a firefighter for 12 years, and we looked at the accident pyramid. So at the tip of the pyramid are the horrible wrecks, the things that you hear about in the news, the deaths, the fatalities, the everything has gone wrong moments. Below that are the near misses. And think about this in your own lives. I could think of at least 3 or 4 times on the road when I absolutely should have died. I got lucky. And we probably all have some of those things, if not death, then at least serious car crashes where you just missed each other by a foot or a second. Those are near misses. So what is it about those that was dangerous? And then beneath that in the pyramid is all of our behaviors. And those are the things that really drive our risk. So it's things like looking at your phone or playing with the radio or being tired or being intoxicated. Not my problem, but there's a mayor of Fort Wayne who's grappling with that right now. So think about how those behaviors drive all those outcomes and funnel it up the pyramid. So this is my point in our elections, is that the more that we do managing the behaviors, the good things that we do day in, day out, like eating a healthy diet and exercise, if we manage the behaviors, the outcome is likely to be quite good. One more thought on straight ticket voting. Again, shorthand. I personally would like to see it ended in Indiana, and the other thing to point out that's really important is if you vote straight ticket, no matter who you vote for, Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian straight ticket, you are missing out. You are abdicating your vote on several important issues. You are not voting for nonpartisan offices like school board. You are not voting for referenda like tax increases for schools or other public referenda. So please know that you are giving up, you're forfeiting your vote on many, many important offices and issues. So for that reason alone, don't vote straight ticket.
Easy enough. All right, James, we have one question for you. Do you have any thoughts on how you can improve USERA law?
Yeah. Is that the end of the question?
It's just from my time in the National Guard, I've heard multiple people getting fired from civilian jobs with a blanket statement they're underperforming in their civilian career as a way for employers to avoid USERA violations.
So, for those who don't know, this law protects those currently serving in the military, and it was established in 1994. And essentially, what it does is it tells the private market that they can't fire you if you're serving, if the reason you're absent is because of military. So it really does protect us as a nation. I mean, it allows for soldiers to have everyday jobs, and especially for those who are in the National Guard, who they're private citizens, as well as serving both. So yes, we have to protect that, and it's very important. And I think what he's getting at is some jobs, especially in Indiana, where it's really easy to fire somebody. You just most of the time it favors the employer. So I definitely think that those violations should be investigated. There is a proper way to make those allegations, and someone I worked with actually filed that report one time, and they did a whole investigation. So what I would tell those who have issues with this, file that report. It may or may not make a difference, but we have to have a way to investigate it so that we can see the pattern and behaviors from the private market and what's happening with that law. Definitely, if someone's violating that law, it definitely needs to be investigated and probably fines enforced.
I was not aware of that. That's kind of wild.
So as a member of the military, member of the Indiana Air National Guard, I'm also protected by USERA and grateful for it. I work proactively with my employer to make sure that I'm able to cover or hand off things, but it's not always possible. So think about one job where it's very transactional. You're working the French fry machine, right? You come in, you're either working the machine or you're not. And if you're not there, like being on guard duty or being on training or being called up for deployment, that's pretty easy, where the employer find somebody else to cover your shift and work the French fry machine. Okay, that's pretty clear. But what happens about a job or in a job where your work is more about relationships or as a longer time horizon? So let's say you're trying to sell farm equipment, and that's your job. You're selling and servicing very large piece of equipment that might not even get sold or serviced more than once a year. So how do you build those relationships? How are you available? And then think about how your sales numbers might hurt if you're gone for a few weeks or even a short deployment of several months or 6 months at a time, which is also pretty standard. So that's where being available to the military can certainly impact the quote, the quality of your work. And yes, somebody who's there to answer the phone day in and day out for 6 months is going to have better sales numbers than somebody in the military who's called away for that period of time. And we have to look at performance relative to availability and time in the office, and perhaps in some cases reorient and readjust jobs and success metrics to not penalize members of our military who are serving and who are not able to perform on the same basis as people who are available during that time of service.
It makes sense to me. Okay, so I promise we're trying to get to all the questions, but they're flying in.
Every time you're on, Jeff, we get loads of questions. So
These
that's
are
a
good
good problem.
questions.
Okay, so I think there's a couple I can kind of combine.
Let's take a few more James questions, and there's a meaty one about audits that I definitely want to get back to.
That's the one I saw it. I wanted to make sure that it was known, but I was like, that one's gonna. I'm curious to the answer as well, but
Sure.
that one's definitely gonna have some. That'll have some meat on it.
But I do like to share, so let's get some more James questions out here.
James. If you get elected, what's your plan to stand out and be heard to represent your Hoosier constituents?
So I absolutely love this question because honestly, voting for if I win in Senate, I actually have some of the most powerful and influential voices because when we talk about the Senate, it's often split very close to 50-50. And to represent Hoosiers, what happens is when a Democrat gets elected, they're going to serve their Democratic establishment. Same thing with Republicans. They're going to serve the Republican establishment. As a libertarian, I get to negotiate on behalf of Hoosiers. So it's an amazing opportunity for Hoosiers to actually have more power with their vote because it's somebody that both sides have to negotiate with to get that percent over what they need to pass any bill. And I absolutely believe that as a libertarian, it does give more voice to Hoosiers.
Great. So now we're going to do this one because, as we all know, James has a debate coming up on Sunday. So this one we're going to limit. James, do you know your allotted time for answers?
I thought it was 2 minutes. However, I think the last contract said 60 seconds, 1 minute. So I need to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's 1 minute.
While he's looking that up, I can talk to that a little bit. So James and I will have another thing in common that we will share the same moderator for the debates. And I thought she was very fair, and you can see in the video, yeah, these were good questions. They were well compiled. The time allocations were fair and enforced consistently. So I was very pleased with that. I liked the way that the rebuttals worked. I thought they were very civil, but also informative. So when you think about that exchange, neither one of us were talking over the other or interjecting or calling names directly, perhaps. So I thought that was all very positive, and I thought I was pleased with the way that the debate was handled and very grateful for the moderator for being a professional and doing all of that. I might have appreciated a little bit more clarity before we got started about what is an opening statement and what is the opening question. That was a bit of a rough start for me, but those are things that we can improve with time.
Absolutely. All right. So, James, you have 1 minute to answer this question. What do you feel is the most important part of the job that you are seeking?
Absolutely serving Hoosiers. And I said this all along with the campaign trail. When we're an elected official, our first job is to be a public servant. And if I'm not representing those who I serve, I shouldn't be doing that job. So absolutely number one priority, making sure that Hoosiers are represented well in Washington, D.C., and then making sure their wallet is represented, making sure that civil liberties are represented, making sure that our constitutional rights are fought for as Hoosiers. So absolutely, when we talk about priorities, it's being a public servant first to Hoosiers.
Very good. Very concise, quick. Jeff, we'll give you 1 minute to answer.
Okay. Top priority is protecting our elections. We can't have our society without an ability to agree to disagree. And protecting our elections means rebuilding trust in them. And right now, that means audits and receipts. That means rebuilding the transparency, like managing the coffee shop, like a blockchain, all these things that just show us how the process is working. That's what we need, that honesty, that integrity, that transparency, that accountability, and that accessibility. When people call with concerns, I heard about this software, I heard about this problem over there, we need to be able to address it and make sure that those issues are heard and responded to.
Perfect. I'm trying to formulate all the questions here because we did get one from Rob Kendall of what does Diego do for a job, and did you know that Todd Young was a Marine?
Todd Young's a Marine? I would have never guessed.
I'm pretty sure I saw his commercial, and that was the only thing that was said in the commercial is that he used to be a Marine. And I was like, is this a political commercial or a Marine commercial?
And you know, it's great that he served his country through that means, but there's other ways to serve your country as well. And for me, it's through serving the autism community. But the reality is you have to have more than just I'm a Marine to have a platform on. And when we get to the debate, uh, his platform will look weak because things that he pretends to run on, like inflation, is actually contributed to him when you actually look at real numbers and policies that he enforces. Doesn't protect our Second Amendment rights. And absolutely, it's time for a change. So, running on being a Marine is something that, you know, again, he should be proud that he's a Marine, but we need real policies that help Hoosiers.
Okay, we're going to throw one more James question out there, and then we're getting into the 92 county audit.
Can I do a slight follow-up on that one, though? The first one? So I won't speak to what any particular candidate or individual does for a job, but we should talk about the theory behind it. So campaign finance laws are meant to reveal improper relationships and prohibit improper relationships and reveal questionable relationships. There's the saying, if your relationship can't be known, then should you be having it? So campaign finance law is meant to show where your money comes from and to have a detailed record of that. You can't have money come from foreign nationals and foreign sources. And it's important to know how much of a candidate's money comes from the industry he or she might represent. That's one of the questions that comes up. That's one of the great frustration of taking big PAC money or money from special interest groups or lobbyists, right? We sort of inherently feel that that is not always fair, or that our elected officials are extremely influenced by that. But it also holds true on a personal level. We need to know how these individuals as people, as personal individuals, how we make our living. And are we being bought by some other entity, force, or person, or nation, perhaps? So it's important to know, how do these people make money? And I know, James, we've talked a lot about our careers in the campaign, in our campaigns. And James, obviously, you're talking about working with autism, and there was a magnificent Indy Star article that showed just how big a heart you have and the specific firm that you work for in providing those autism services. And my career is very clear. It's online. It has been. I've been working for a nonprofit called Students for Liberty, the largest student freedom libertarian group that focuses on free speech and free markets. Side note, Students for Liberty is a 501c3 nonprofit and doesn't endorse any candidates, campaigns, or political parties. So these are our jobs. This is how we pay our mortgages, our rent, buy our food. And it's important to know how we're bought and paid for. And I think that's true for every candidate. And I challenge voters to continue to hold firm in demanding to know, how are their candidates bought and paid for?
And as we've learned tonight, we know food is the most important of those things that the money is spent on.
I might disclose my ice cream budget, but that could come later.
All right, James. Would you support a single subject law or constitutional amendment, or would that be a bad idea?
A single subject law. So I've talked about this in earlier town halls. It's been a while since it came up, but the idea that I believe that laws should be able to be understood by the common man, and part of that is to make single laws part of that process. And when we put so much into one bill, that's impossible for anybody to read, including the senators who vote on it. Most of the time, they don't even read the whole thing. Their staffers just tell them whether it's a good idea or not. But we definitely have to simplify it. And I think that that's a huge part of it, is when we look at single issues and put those forward. And we could see it play out in real time this year. Todd Young with veteran issues, he flip-flopped on this bill, and he said there's too much pork, but then he went back and voted for the exact same bill despite the pork. But the reality is veterans shouldn't be part of that pawn process. If we took care of our veterans with a single bill, a single issue bill, then they don't have to become pawns on a chessboard that their care isn't taken care of because of some other pork. So definitely this is a process that we need to change in Washington, D.C., and I would definitely be a voice and advocate for it.
Great response. All right, let's get into the 92 county audit? And
All right, let's hear that question. It
I'll
was
read the full question.
Yeah, it's from a minute ago here.
A minute.
I'm loving the questions tonight. These are some great questions, everybody. Thank you.
Oh yeah. One of your biggest policies is auditing all 92 counties. Do you anticipate logistical challenges with this, such as finding the money and manpower to get it all done in a timely and efficient manner without becoming a boondoggle?
Matt, this is the $1 million question. Absolutely. So the hundreds of publicly traded companies on NASDAQ, on New York Stock Exchange, every quarter they have to publish audited financials. These are very complex multinational businesses with works in progress. There are all kinds of different complexities in each one. And yet there is an industry that exists to properly, legally, and substantially audit these financials, and to do so within compliance of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, every quarter. So the talent, the technology, the manpower, all of that exists. We just need to purchase it and contract it for the state of Indiana. When we do that, that expertise is going to help us scope the size of the project. So if you want to put a pool in your backyard, I've never done that before, and I'm going to depend on the contractors and their expertise to help me figure out, well, how much do we need to dig? How much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to take? What equipment are we going to need? What manpower are we going to need for that? So it's their expertise to guide us. And yes, we are absolutely going to get multiple quotes and multiple bids and speak with multiple vendors. But at the end of the day, we're going to figure out what's the right size for us from a reputable company that has demonstrated competence in doing these services and performing these services. And they will have to guide us for what sampling rate. And I'm not proposing a recount. That's totally different. That's counting every single ballot. What I'm proposing is a random sampling rate, random audit, but doing so across all 92 counties, because that way it's just sort of like a glance across our car dashboard, a glance at all the different systems. It doesn't tell us all the details. We won't know the life history of every single system in the car, but at a glance, we know meaningfully what's working, what's not. So we start from that vantage point. The auditing company, the auditing firm, will help us scope it and determine how much resources, how much staffing and manpower we'll need, how many auditors we'll have in Marion County versus how many auditors we'll need in Switzerland County, or can they sit in one place and audit results from both? And the key here is to work backwards from a constraint, which is 30 days, because we have to certify the elections within 30 days per federal law, HAVA, the 2002 Act, Help America Vote Act. So whatever we need to do, we need to get enough people in the door working on this so that way it can be audited and approved within those 30 days. That's one of the constraints.
I feel like that definitely helped to kind of clarify that. So I think I kind of knew the gist, but I feel like that gave way more information into how efficiently it could actually work.
And the key thing here is that this is independent, right? We want somebody who's not us. The clerks shouldn't be checking their own work. In middle school, we learned, take your test, pass it to the student next to you, right? Trade and grade. Right now, we're grading our own tests, and we're being told that those tests are perfect hundreds. I want to believe that, but I also need to verify that. That's why we have an independent audit. James, that's why your boss at the end of the day counted your register. He didn't just take your word for it. Oh, James, you're spot on. Great. Love it. Thanks so much. No, he checked. He verified what you told him. He trusted you, but he verified it for himself. So having an independent outside agency not only gives us the scale, right? We shouldn't have 1,000 auditors or 10 auditors sitting around on payroll all year round. No, we need this specific service one time of the year. So let's have that as an outside service that bridges or that gives us that impartiality. And let's scale up so that way we can do it within 30 days.
I like it. All right, so we are coming up on the 40-minute mark here. I know we usually like to keep these short, but
there's so many great questions.
So
Let's give
many.
another one to James. I feel like Santa Claus and Christmas morning. We're handing out gifts. All right, you child one, get a gift. Child two, get a gift.
It is great when we have a lot of audience interaction, and we definitely want to get to as many of these questions as possible. I do think we are going to have a hard cutoff at 60 minutes so that, and we'll have closing statements within that, but we have time to take a few more, Chris.
Okay, so let's do this one here. James, do you support the enforcement of existing immigration laws, or should we have new laws?
We absolutely need to take a very in-depth look at our immigration process, and this is something that there's a lot of talk about the border and border security, but one of the greatest ways to secure our border is to have a actual legal process for individuals to get here. I look back to a letter I got pretty earlier in the campaign, and it was someone who is desperately looking for a way to get her husband here legally, and she couldn't, even though they were married, she couldn't not get him here. So the process is I mean, to be blunt, it's ridiculous. So we need to make sure that we have a way to still vet people, but those who want to live the American dream have that way in and flourish here. They want to work here. They want to be productive members of society, and so we can vet those individuals and make that process easier for them to come in. Definitely, definitely need to look at that. And then with that, we do need secure borders. I tell people look at a castle. A castle always has a moat. We have to have a security. I mean, that's just part of our process. But with that moat, we also have to have that drawbridge that's absolutely wide, and so people know how to get here legally. And it is one of my top priorities to make sure that we actually do something about it, and just instead of just using it as rhetoric for votes every 6 or 4 years, depending on what office you're running for.
Part of that, doing what you say and not saying what you need just to get elected.
Exactly.
Imagine that integrity. One of the things that, speaking of integrity, that sort of comes up in the debate, it came up in the debate, and it's come up since, and I want to really hit this point hard. Integrity never needs to hide. You don't need to be two-faced. You don't need to pretend otherwise. You don't need to refuse to debate. Integrity never needs to hide. So if somebody's hiding something from you, they probably don't have integrity, and you should ask real hard about it.
Okay. Jeff, how do you plan to do the things you speak of as Secretary of State? To my knowledge, Secretary of State can't create or change law. Wouldn't Republican lawmakers pass laws to make your time in office a nightmare?
So that is very factually correct. The Secretary of State is not a member of the General Assembly or the legislature, or the Secretary of State is a member of the executive branch, but of course doesn't sign bills into law. That is the role of the governor. So it's about working with all of those groups. And as a libertarian, I'm neither D nor R, so I can work well with everybody. And as we've seen firsthand, so many of our neighbors are very libertarian, lowercase l libertarian, in their policies and values and principles. So working with those people within this and legislature are going to be, it's a home run. We all want to see integrity restored and trust rebuilt in our elections. So I think the pathway will be very clear there. And people, again, just talking about integrity, people who oppose it, it'll become painfully obvious that they have ulterior motives for why would you oppose that. Even in debate, I just want to see that my vote was counted. Why is my opponent working so hard to ensure that I can't see my vote? That makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think common sense people watching that would recognize that just doesn't seem right.
I can see that.
And Matt had a great comment that, yes, it should have been the 800-pound elephant in the room. I missed it. Dude, you're right. You got it. Nailed it. Next time you debate, you got this. I can't. No, that's excellent. I regret I didn't think of that. And Matt, I'll give you a little insight. I don't always know the things I'm going to say until I've said them. And that was one of those lines I didn't plan. I hadn't practiced that line. I hadn't thought about gorillas. It's just, I said it and then I realized, oh yeah, there it is. I was trying to get, we had 30-second closing, and of course we weren't going to get to make our closing statements. So I was trying to talk about me, to answer the question, to be genuine in doing that, to give a little bit of background on me, but also to talk about the fact that it's inexcusable and unacceptable to have candidates refusing to debate. No matter who you are, no matter what you stand for, no matter which party you're in, refusing to debate is not American.
And on that note, to me, it's crazy how many Republicans have refused to debate this election cycle. To me, that's a sign of a party that is no longer willing to serve its constituents. And it's also a sign that they're not sure on their own policies of how to present them to the public in a very fair forum. So it should be concerning to the voters that they're not showing up across Indiana. Fortunately, Todd Young did agree to one debate, although both the mayor Tom and myself wanted more. I wanted three, and yeah, only one. So props that he took one, but it's still not as many as voters should have.
Now I'll be the outside comic relief. So I'm a big avid watcher of The Office, and when you said sometimes I don't even know what I'm saying, it made me think of a Michael Scott quote of sometimes I start a sentence and I don't know where I'm going. I just hope I find it along the way.
There's more truth to that than I'd like to admit to.
I agree. I do that a lot. Sometimes I just talk and hopefully my word gets out. Now questions.
And debating and debate format are tricky, right? You have to formulate a response. We want a good debate is one where you could see the candidate thinking, right? So debates help us find out who's puppet and who's master. If there's somebody who just can only memorize, this is what I'm told to say, they're a puppet. They can't think for themselves and they won't think and work for you. That's what debates help us understand. So when we're in debates and we're trying to think about what's the right response and also start talking at the same time, it can be awkward. It can definitely go wrong.
Yeah, it would be funny to see. It would definitely make a blooper reel on a couple of Facebook pages.
And even rewatching my debate, there were a couple of times where I wanted to slap my forehead and say, oh, that was not my finest work.
Yeah, I'm sure Sunday there will be a few of those moments where I look back and I'm like, I probably could have said this better, but it's important to be raw and authentic too, and it's a part of that human factor of I'm not a robot out there. I want to think through these answers, and I want to give you the best answer I can within 60 seconds.
Well, see, and now I'm going to go into what I believe is you shouldn't go into the debate thinking there's going to be things I'm going to say that I'm not going to like. We go into it with a positive attitude. I'm going to crush it and move on.
Well, my policies will crush it because my policies are the best policies in this Senate race.
See, that's the attitude you need.
James and I, so there's the old saying, if at first you practice, what a tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive. The idea is that once we start lying, we have to keep it up. And then we have to maintain the story and remember which lie we told to which person. James and I have it easiest in any debate because as libertarians, we're living our principles. It's the same principle every day, all the time. All your liberties, all the time. And when we go onto the debate stage, we don't have to worry about the inconsistencies or hypocrisies or what we promise this group versus what we promise that group. We can just tell one truth, the truth, every time. And so from that perspective, it is, if you want to debate, go on there as a libertarian.
Definitely makes it easier. Okay, we'll do one last question and then we'll get into the closing statements. So we got another one from Matt. Right now, abortion rights are a huge hot button issue. Indiana recently passed a law that functionally eliminated it within the state entirely, but it's currently held up in court due to a judge's ruling. How do you anticipate this may end, and how do you think the future of Indiana's stance on this matter should go?
Well, the ruling just went to Indiana Supreme Court, so we'll see what the exact holdup is and end up seeing their ruling. What happened when the Dobbs decision came down? It reversed Roe versus Wade, but it also made it currently a state issue. On the federal level, both to codify it or to protect life, either way, there's not enough votes within the Senate. It's pretty much a locked stalemate. So right now it is a state's issue, and it's important to acknowledge that. But my plan, despite whatever each state decides, is to reduce abortions through a non-ban. And this works whether you're in California with a very pro-choice crowd, or it works in Indiana, it works in Arizona. It doesn't matter what state, but the reality is we can reduce abortions through all 50 states without any ban. And that's looking at baby boxes. It's looking at reasons why women have abortions, which it could be economic, it can be lack of knowledge, it could be contraceptive issues, and it can be making birth control over the counter. All these things, if we adjust in our society, we can naturally reduce abortions. So when I look at how to really look at this issue, I want a stance that will succeed in all 50 states to reduce that naturally while still protecting medical rights. And I believe that politicians shouldn't act as physicians. So that's an important issue. But I believe there is ways to reduce it. And we definitely could do that through our society.
Now, see, I heard your entire thing prior to you saying it, which means I think I've heard it too many times.
Well, it is an issue that comes up a lot, and I understand it. It's important for Hoosier voters to know exactly where I stand on that issue.
Well, and I think it bodes very well to what Jeff was saying of if you're living your principles, you get the same answer every time.
I'm going to throw out one more saying here. Be careful who you step on your way up the ladder, because you'll meet them on the way down. And so that's also a good just truth in life. And again, why I personally seek to be professional and at least cordial and civil with my opponents, because that's necessary. And that's the right thing to do, plain and simple. And so there's a question here from Larry Silver, quote, if Diego loses, does he have to sell his campaign car? Question mark, end quote. So this is about being nice to the people on the way up, because campaign finance law is complicated. And if you have an asset that was purchased for a political campaign, the short answer is no, you're not likely to be able to use it for personal reasons unless you continue using it for campaigning. So under those rules, then yes, he might have to sell his campaign car shortly after election. So going back to the principle, be nice to people on the way up, because you'll meet them on the way down. And it's entirely possible he could have me or a Democrat in the office of Secretary of State to enforce campaign finance laws against him.
And I believe Destiny did say that she was for improving campaign finance laws, or at least the transparency of it.
I think we all are. The campaign finance laws are very focused on the two-party system, and they're certainly designed to keep everybody else out. That's one thing that we as libertarians and any third party needs to focus on reforming. They are complex. We mentioned that Holly Sullivan, our current Secretary of State, actually violated campaign finance laws when she first took office. She was doing fundraising when she wasn't allowed to, because the General Assembly was still in session, essentially taking away our rights. But that was it was a violation of law, and she had to retract that. But she also, how do you investigate yourself? How do you report to yourself in that sense? And campaign finance law is tricky and it's complicated. So we need real expertise in there to manage it, and then to work with the legislature and the governor's office to simplify, streamline, and improve the intentions of it.
Absolutely. All right. So at this point, we will go ahead and move into the closing segments. And Jeff, we will let you go first.
Well, thank you all for the great questions tonight. I feel like James and I could both stay on here and talk for a long time.
On that note, not to interrupt your closing, but I think last time we actually did go 90 minutes because of how many questions we got.
It was 90 minutes, right? I thought, like, well, you only scheduled this for 30 minutes tonight? What are we talking about? I was going to go 90. But no, and that's the fun. Like, this is good. This is the discussion we should have. I would love to have more town halls like this. I'd love to be in person. I'd love to be having a beer together and discussing these things and hearing more from you and making this more of a conversation rather than a one-way discussion, which is sort of naturally the way StreamYard is set up. But from the perspective of what I'm focused on right now, it's working for you to make sure that you know your vote was counted, and for all of us to never have another January 6th again. So that way we have trust in our elections. We have a process with dignity. We have a process we can rely on, and we have a civil and peaceful transfer of power. At the end of the day, that's what distinguishes us from every other nation on earth.
For more information, you can go to moreforindiana.com. All right, James, you're up.
We are really tired of a broken system, and we need a fresh approach to Washington, D.C. If you like what you're hearing tonight, join us for another town hall on a Wednesday. Early voting has started. Just today, I was reading about different voters going to the polls. Make sure your neighbors are informed about their choices. It's a grassroots movement, so we absolutely need you to help us spread the word that there are more choices on the ballot. We have many things to look forward to. I am putting up billboards, and we're looking now at getting some newspaper ads as well as some other advertisements so that people can hear about a fresh approach to Washington, D.C. So if you're interested in helping our cause in that way, definitely consider donating at www.sceniacforsenate.com. I thank you for being here with us today, and we always look forward to these questions. Look forward to next Wednesday. I'm not sure who will be the guest, but we will definitely answer your questions. And one last statement: Stephanie Dosbach asked, "What am I going to do following Election Day on November 9th? November 9th, I am taking a nap."
And just to add on to your going for newspaper ads, we are looking for about roughly $500 to run those ads. So remember, for the people, by the people.
Oh, I did get a comment today on Facebook and asking me about lobbyists, and somehow I only answered one part of their question and not the second part about the lobbyist, and that was my mistake. But the reality is I've said all along, my campaign is completely funded by the people for the people because that's how I believe things are done. I don't believe in lobbyist money, so definitely we do need those donations coming in though. So definitely consider putting a little bit extra change towards my campaign. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you very much. And we will talk to you all later.
Thanks